Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. We got one question for you. What keeps you up at night?
Welcome to the Think Factory's Workplace podcast, powered by OGC Solutions. My name is Alka Bahal. I'm a partner with Outside General Counsel Solutions and the chair of our Corporate Immigration Services Group. I'll be your host today. I'm very pleased to have with me today Gary Ingenito, accomplished healthcare executive with extensive leadership experience across clinical development, regulatory affairs, and medical operations. Welcome to the podcast, Gary.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So can you start by telling us, how did you decide, or what first inspired you to pursue both an MD and a PhD?
I was looking to be an academic physician. I had done research through my college years and even into high school, and found that the research and then the application, so the translational aspects of research into clinical practice or treatments was very exciting.
Very interesting. Now, a lot of medical researchers have just an MD. How did the fact that you had a PhD influence how you pursue your clinical research and your career path? Would it have been different if you only had one or the other?
I think and feel that a PhD really is a way of training your thinking into critical questioning, evaluating the results, planning the strategy of what you're going to do next with the research, and then continuing to build a story around whatever project you're working on. So for me, at least, it gave me good critical thinking approach.
Interesting. And so at some point in your career, you moved away from academic research and moved into more product-related research. How was that change?
I was working as an investigator in some clinical trials, and was interested when representatives from the pharmaceutical company would come down to check on the progress or to monitor the study, because industry is not something they teach you either in graduate school or medical school. So through those questions, one day he said, "Oh, we happen to have a product that's about to be approved, and we would like a neurologist to join the company and help us with that launch. And you've been asking questions about industry. Would you like to know more and come up and interview with us?" I said, okay. I think that would be, again, a way of learning some more about the other side of industry rather than just being the investigator on a clinical trial. Mm-hmm. And it sounded very interesting when I went. You have the opportunity to work with all different leading scientists in the world, as well as some of the best clinicians in their areas that one can find. So I thought, I can touch potentially so many more patients through the pharmaceutical industry and development versus one patient at a time in the clinic. And I felt like I would try it for a year. If I didn't like it, I'd go back to practice. And that was 30 plus years ago.
Clearly it worked out in your favor. You've explained to me a little in the past how academic research is more focused on the disease, and industry research is more broad for a population. And so you feel like you can reach more people. How do you compare your roles in academia versus pharmaceuticals? Is there one better than the other?
No, they each have their place, and they each form a part of the puzzle to put together, again, the research piece, whether that's preclinical research, whether it may be some clinical research in a group of patients, and then to translate that into a commercial product that's broadly available for the whole patient population.
Interesting. Now, you worked across drugs, biologics, and combination products. How do you approach development differently for each category? Is there a difference?
Oh, there's a big difference. And I think to have a well-rounded knowledge of development of products, you need to try, especially early in your career, all the different aspects that, drugs, small molecules is certainly much different than the issues you deal with biologics. And of course, device has its own set of issues. And when you combine them, drug and device, again, now you have to think about, okay, I know what the drug does, but when I put it together with the device, what happens? And if you have that type of overall information, overall experience, it has really helped me when I'm looking at any one of the products and saying, well, maybe this drug would be useful if we combined it with a device. And yes, I'm familiar with that. So let's explore that as another opportunity in terms of how to translate the science, what we know about the drug, into the actual clinical practice to help the patient.
Really, in pharmaceutical development, regulatory challenges are key, right? That's a very big part of. You were most recently chief medical officer and regulatory officer at Catalyst Pharmaceuticals. How does that regulatory plan fit in? Do you start that early? Do you have that in place before you're beginning product development? And is that something that you look at globally or locally?
So I had some very good mentors during my career, and they used to say to me, you can do clinical trials on a drug, but if you haven't thought about the regulatory pathway and can't get it approved, it has no value.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, you can think about the regulatory strategy, but if that involves clinical trials that are just not feasible, again, you have no pathway forward. So I learned very early that you needed to have at the beginning a target product profile. I need to define the product and what I want it to be if it were to be successful. That provides your initial roadmap of how you will proceed. But you tie that then to the regulatory strategy. You do a regulatory plan so that you have milestones for both the development side and the regulatory side where you can make decisions. No, I'm not going to proceed further because we've not met one of the milestones that we needed to. Or yes, everything is going as hoped for, and we want to continue to invest in the development and expose patients, because I think you need to always consider, and in this side of the business, I'm very thankful for the patients who are willing to participate in clinical trials. A lot of times you don't always know what's going to happen when you expose an individual or a larger group of individuals to a product. So they are so important, but you also want to make sure that if you're seeing any type of signal in your development, you can say, yes, that's a milestone that tells me stop.
Right, that makes perfect sense. In your 25 plus years in pharmaceuticals, have you seen changes in clinical trial design or regulatory science that have impacted how drugs are developed now versus 30 years ago?
Yes, I have. There is now much more acceptance for the adaptive trial design, where you're adjusting the trial as you get and collect the data. So a little bit more real time than I have a fixed plan that can't change, and I'll just see the results at the end, and from there start again, maybe in a different way. So the adaptive design, I think, has been a great advance. The ability and acceptance of biomarkers now is very important, especially as you're dealing with rare diseases. And so that has facilitated development. The part of it that has changed is the business side. Institutions, I'm finding, see clinical research, clinical trials much more as a business these days, as opposed to we want to participate in a trial to see if we can find new cures or treatments for patients. So that is a big change that I have seen.
Yes, definitely. You're when you began your career, you were much more hands-on, right? You were sort of a clinical researcher dealing with that part of it, and then you've moved your way into C-suite leadership. What are some leadership lessons that you had to learn along the way?
Actually, quite a bit. And I also took classes and tried to develop my leadership skills. Again, not something that is a course in graduate or medical school. I think most importantly, I've learned and practiced now is you need to have respect for the people you work with. You need to have a flexible style. So everybody, including myself, has our good points and some not so good points, strengths and some weaknesses. And I think you need to be able to have a style that can flex, especially when you have a team. And if you're leading a team, that will bring out people's strengths. And how do you then compensate for maybe some of their weaknesses? Because they're valuable contributors, but you just want to help them on the areas where they're not as strong. Also, to be able to have the breadth of knowledge to be able to identify a potential issue and to go deeper into the group, to be even more hands-on, to help those team members circumvent the issue or solve the issue, and then come back out to your supervisory leadership role, not micromanage it. I think in pharmaceutical development, there will be issues. There's no question. There will always be issues. And it's how you solve them that is the real success.
That can be a real challenge, diving into the nuances and then coming back out to the leadership position. I think a lot of leaders do fall into the trap of micromanagement.
Yes, you can fall into it, and you just have to watch yourself and make sure you're really keeping a focus on, I'm here to help them with this specific issue, but my role is overall coordination and integration of whatever group you're overseeing.
Yeah, makes a lot of
I
sense.
think the difference is that when you work in a very small company, then you're doing so much yourself already because you have such a small team.
Right.
And again, that two different styles that you have to use. Startup company, startup biotech, where you're really doing and involved in everything hands-on, versus again, mid-size or large company where the role again is more supervisory, integrative.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me you're still at the heart of who you are, an academic. You realized moving into leadership positions that you needed to develop a different set of skills, and you purposely went out there and learned those leadership skills, which I think is amazing because most scientific endeavors don't teach you how to be a leader, right? They teach you how to do the thing. So through your learning and your experience, what would you consider to be the three most important traits leaders today should have?
So as I stated previously, I said, always treat your employees with respect and have a flexible style to take advantage of your team's strengths and compensate where you need to for your weaknesses, and really to be a sounding board. People should not feel intimidated to come to you and ask questions. I always practice wherever an open door policy. You don't need an appointment to come and see me. If you think it's important enough to come by or to give me a call because there's a problem, then I'm going to stop what I'm doing and I'm going to talk to you about that.
Good advice. What advice would you give to physicians or scientists who are considering moving into pharmacy or biotech?
I would highly encourage it. I think it's a great experience. I also spent time in the contract research world, which is really a challenge to stretch yourself because you're working across so many different clients, so many personalities, different products, different indications, and learning how to be the expert in each. I think that there's a real issue still in healthcare professionals who want to get into industry and being able to get a start.
Mm-hmm.
So, small companies just don't have the luxury to be in the training mode, right? They have usually limited funds, limited time, and they need to reach their goal in order to survive and grow.
Right.
Big Pharma is doing more of that. They're bringing in trainees, but it's hard to get a position because a lot of time they want some experience. And I've always said, but how do I get the experience if you won't let me come in and start to learn?
Right. That's
So I
always
think it
catch
is
22.
difficult. Mhm. I would I would love personally to see industry be a course in medical school. I think it would be something that would help open options for healthcare providers. Not everybody has to see a patient every day to be effective in medicine.
That's a terrific idea. And did we talk about previously, do you think that there is some room in industry for nurses?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There's lots of opportunities for nurses in terms of pharmacovigilance, in terms of clinical operations, monitoring of clinical trials, project management. Their clinical training makes them very valuable in multiple roles in industry.
Very interesting. Not something, on the outside as a layperson that we would necessarily think of. That does make a lot of sense. Do you find that smaller companies or even early stage biotech companies tend to face more regulatory pitfalls than the bigger companies?
Yes, overall, I would say you're correct. Usually there's smaller staff, there's less experience in the startups or the small pharmaceutical companies, and they just don't have that hands-on interaction with the regulatory authorities to understand how to navigate and how to negotiate with the authorities. I have no problem with the regulators. They have a job to do. And a lot of times it's to protect the safety of patients. So I want to work with them, but again, you have to understand where they're coming from and what their answers are going to be when you ask certain questions. After a while, you know what's going to be the answer. So if you say the company would like to present data from the previous information that we had on this product in our NDA BLA. Yeah, you can ask the question. I know the answer is going to be that'll be a review issue. So when they see it, then they'll find out whether it's acceptable or not.
And do you think this is knowledge that you've simply developed over time and experience with dealing with regulatory officials? Or do you think the culture or the relationship generally between pharmaceutical companies and regulatory agencies has evolved over the years?
It's really the experience. I find them to be, as regulators, they're well trained to be quite consistent. And so it's having been in multiple meetings, having talked to them on different projects at different types of meetings, getting information during certain, type FDA meeting, for example, that you understand how they're thinking, what they need from you, and you can put together a good story in a package. And then the story, of course, is science and clinically based. But again, your submission, whether it's an IND, whether it's an NDA, a BLA, you should put together from a regulator's point of view the story that you want to tell and present them with the information that makes it easy for them to follow along with the story you're telling.
That makes sense. So it's sort of the parallel of being in immigration and dealing with the federal agency that you need to have approved the visa petition. It's not just about does your person qualify or meet the criteria, but it is how do you communicate that to the agency so that they understand it and see that it fits the criteria.
Good parallel, yes.
So So looking now to the future, AI is obviously interplaying with all sorts of areas. What role do you see AI playing in the future of drug development?
I believe AI is just getting started in drug development, but will have a broad role, particularly as it relates to putting data together and doing summaries and maybe some um, rapid extracts of data. Also, in terms of writing at least a draft of the regulatory documents so that the information is all in place. To me, it remains to be seen if AI knows how to tell the story you want.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at least all of that can have a condensed timeline than what it is today, where it's just manually writing report after report.
Absolutely. Where do you think the larger portion of time is spent? Do you think it's in wading through the vast amount of data, or do you think it's in the report writing?
Most of the time is spent in really collecting that data, because whether you need a study that is 1,000 patients for a year or an ultra rare disease where you're trying to find, 30 patients for a 6-month exposure, that's really where the where the challenge is, and potentially where biomarkers may be able to help you.
Yeah, that makes sense. So at least in theory, AI should help move at least some portions of the process along more quickly. The question is always, how reliable is it? So what's
I think
next for
we'll
you
see.
here?
What's next? At this point in my career, I would really like to be involved in areas where I can help develop the next generation of pharmaceutical individuals. So, I have 30 plus years of experience that covers, as you said, drugs, devices, biologics, disease management, combination products, in pharmacovigilance, regulatory affairs, of course, medical affairs, so the post approval aspects of it, and clinical development. And I would really like to now take the next generation and say, I've made a lot of the mistakes that you potentially will make, and I can help you avoid those. I can share my experiences and knowledge with you, and you will be the leader of the next generation of products and drugs.
That's amazing. I can imagine that there is a huge need for that in the market. As you said, there's not a lot of opportunities out there to learn how to move it into industry. And certainly with these smaller, startup type of entities that could clearly benefit from your expertise and coaching in terms of improving or at least sharing the breadth of knowledge you developed. I mean, it's very unusual for someone to be both the medical director and the regulatory affairs director. I imagine you have a extensive and unique body of knowledge up there in your head.
Yeah, whether it's a small company that has a very limited development team because they have resource restrictions, and I could help them in terms of their strategies, in terms of their reg plan, in terms of development plan, FDA meetings, how to approach them, what are the most important questions, or maybe it's a new CMO who's just been appointed to the position and isn't quite sure what that encompasses, and would like somebody to talk to or to consult with.
Yeah, that makes great sense. So where can people learn more about you and get in touch with you, Gary?
I'm happy to be available to people to help them, and if they have some needs, to contact me through email.
You want to share that email address, or should people find you on
Yeah,
LinkedIn?
sure. It is ggfi@msn.com.
Perfect. And before I let you go, I have one last question for you, which is a question I did not prepare you for, but it is our traditional last question on the Think Factory.
Okay.
And that is, what keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up?
And don't tell me it's the horses in the wife's farm.
No, they don't keep me up. They make me tired enough after helping out at the farm to sleep well.
But
I
there's
don't
nothing keeping
really,
you up, right?
right. I really don't have anything that keeps me up at night. That
Well,
makes
that
me
is,
uncomfortable.
love that. I'm glad to hear that.
I think you have to learn to enjoy each day, to the best you can. And there's things that you can do something about. But again, to be worrying about the uncontrollable um, doesn't really isn't really a good use of energy.
Very good advice. Very good advice. Well, thank you for joining us today, Gary. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it very much. I was happy to share my experiences with you.
I wish you all the best in your next chapter of life. Thank you all for listening to the Think Factory's Workplace Podcast. I'm Alka Bahal from OGC Solutions, signing off. Until next time.